Hey, how's it going everyone? At the time I'm making this video right now, Thor Love and Thunder just released and I just got out of the movie and I feel sick. I'm just kidding, those are the impossible nuggets I'm feeling in my stomach right now. I ate it at the AMC. Oh, I don't feel too good. So what did I think of the latest installment to come out of the MCU? Well, I feel like I've been saying that walking out of every single MCU project that has released since, I don't know, Avengers Endgame. While I have loved some stuff to come out of this recent phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just Spider-Man No Way Home, Loki, and I actually kinda like Falcon and Winter Soldier despite how many people feel about it. That's like 3 projects out of the 11 completed projects out of Phase 4 that have released at the time of making this video. Miss Marvel 2, sorry I forgot that show was gonna wrap up before this video came out, but yeah, I wouldn't really add it to the list of the projects that I actually loved. That's not amazing. I was very excited to go into Thor Love and Thunder because it was a character that I grew up with. I grew up with the MCU. Me being the age of 19, I feel like I'm part of the first generation that actually grew up with this franchise. I was a little kid going into the first Iron Man. I was going into my final years of high school by the time the Infinity Saga wrapped up. Characters like Thor, like Iron Man, like Captain America, those aren't just characters in a movie to me anymore. They feel like a part of me. So being able to see the last standing of the big 3 at least one more time was an incredible feeling. My love for Thor skyrocketed after Ragnarok, going on probably the best arc of any character in the MCU towards the end of that saga. But now walking out of the movie that's a sequel to one of my favorite MCU films, I am once again walking out of an MCU movie saying, that's how I felt about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That's how I felt about Shang-Chi. I downright did not like, and I don't think that Black Widow and Eternals are good movies whatsoever. I think they're very bad. And outside of Loki and Falcon and Winter Soldier, I don't think I've fully enjoyed an MCU show. WandaVision was pretty amazing in the beginning, but then fell flat on its face towards the end of its run. Hawkeye was just wow. Moon Knight was and I'm alright with Miss Marvel so far. I think the first episode absolutely blew me away. I loved the style and I loved the characters that were introduced to me, but as the show has gone on, I'm kind of feeling the same emotions I felt towards a show like Moon Knight. Needless to say, I think the MCU Phase 4 has been a complete mess in quality alone. But the sad part is, it's not just the quality that's an issue, there's so much fundamentally wrong with the idea of the MCU Phase 4 so far, and it needs to be addressed, like, right now. This is a franchise I have loved and grown up with my entire life. I do not want to be saying things like this right now, but out of respect for the franchise and wanting it to be better, I kind of have to address this. This is why I think the MCU Phase 4 is a mess. Although we did receive WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier before we received our first MCU Phase 4 movie, if you look at when the MCU Phase 4 was officially announced by Marvel Studios at San Diego Comic-Con, you would see the intended order for these projects to release in, and you could already see cracks in the armor immediately with the first project that was set to release, Black Widow. Not only do I think Black Widow is just a bad movie, it is a completely unnecessary film to the MCU. Yes, it gave us a character like Yelena who will have some kind of role and has had some kind of role in the MCU since that film, but surely there was another way they could have introduced this character without having a film about Black Widow, a character who is dead 2 years prior to this film's release. A film from 2021 that is set in 2016. Not only does this not really progress Natasha's character at all or make me more invested, it kinda just makes me mad that they dug up the grave of a character who's barely even been dead to give her a film where she's overshadowed by a character who they're clearly more interested in setting up. Something I liked about the MCU with characters like Black Widow and Hawkeye is that they can be integral to the story, a part of the Avengers, without them needing their own movie, because it's not necessary. The film is simply unnecessary, it's not needed. But it's an even worse way to kick off the new phase of the MCU. It's not just that it's a new phase, it's the first film in a new phase after the entire Infinity Saga. This is essentially a fresh start. In my opinion, I think this new phase should have started off with a film about a character who's going to be an integral piece of the story for the rest of the saga. You know, kind of what they did with Iron Man. If somehow on God's green earth you don't know, Iron Man and Captain America to an extent were the cornerstones of the MCU for the entire Infinity Saga. Not only did Iron Man kick off the entire MCU with that first film, but also Phase 2 and to an extent Phase 3 kind of sharing the spotlight with Captain America. Point is, this was the character of the MCU, the literal heart of it, so it was important to get you invested in that character for that entire saga. Black Widow is dead. Something that worked and that I loved about the first phase of the MCU was that each film was about its own character, was telling its own story. They didn't tie into each other, there weren't a bunch of references shoved in, but we all knew it was building to one film where they would all cross over. The Avengers. Every single film here is integral, so you understand these characters by the time that they cross over. But as the MCU went on, things got more complicated as you had to build upon those characters and introduce new ones. When Ant-Man was announced and released, a lot of people were like, what the heck is this? Why is this even being made? This is such a B-tier Marvel character, why are they touching this character? And then as the saga goes on, it's revealed that this character was necessary for the Infinity Saga to close up with the Quantum Realm and all of that stuff. Even if it seemed at the time pointless, it really wasn't, as it had to set up Scott as a character and introduce a crucial element to the MCU that would come in handy in the future. Now, are the Ant-Man movies great? No, they're not. They're definitely in the lower echelon of the MCU. I think they would have been much better if they stuck with Edgar Wright, but I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. But I think you get my point. All of these films in the Infinity Saga were necessary. Now, if you go back to the MCU Phase 4, we've received 5 films since, and really only 2 of them have anything to do with each other. It seems like the direction Marvel is going with this new phase is the concept of the multiverse, which is an inherently interesting topic. Really only 2 of the movies and 1 of the shows really dive into this concept. Loki, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The unfortunate part is that all of these don't really tie into each other too well. Yes, they share the concept of the multiverse, but you don't see any mention of the TVA, for instance, in either Spider-Man or Doctor Strange. The cause for breaking open the multiverse in Spider-Man No Way Home isn't caused by Kang, it's caused by a bad spell that Peter messed up. There is a brief passing mention of Spider-Man in Doctor Strange, but nothing else beyond that, where they rehash the same classic Marvel joke of, his name is Spider-Man?
There was an incident with Spider-Man.
What man?
Spider-Man, who has the powers of a spider.
That's the name.
Gross. Does it look like a spider?
No, more like a mouse.
Climbs walls, shoots stuff.
Yeah, bingo.
Out of his butt?
No. Oh, no. Maybe, I don't know. Honestly, I hope not.
And by the time Spider-Man No Way Home is over, it leaves Peter Parker more on his own than ever. Literally, nobody knows who he is. This detaches Peter, therefore Spider-Man, from the Avengers and the overall MCU more than ever before, which I know this is kind of contradicting my statement, but it's kind of appreciated, as that's kind of more of the character that Spider-Man is. But something that is also appreciated about Spider-Man No Way Home, it's an actually good movie. Going back to the Infinity Saga, I think each phase got better. They didn't just tie into each other, they were genuinely really good movies. Specifically towards the tail end of Phase 3, it seemed like Marvel really got a grip on everything they needed to do. Are there some stinkers in there? Absolutely, like Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel. But like previously mentioned, they got Thor right finally. They gave us a great version of Spider-Man. We probably got the best Avengers movies in Phase 3, but with Phase 4, like I said, I think Spider-Man has really been the only truly really good movie. Shang-Chi had glimpses of being a very good MCU movie and gave me flashbacks to Phase 1. I am interested in the character of Shang-Chi, and I do want to see where the character could go in the future, but instead of walking out with the new MCU favorite, I walked out of a film with the same MCU plot tropes, writing, dialogue, and humor that continuously undercuts the genuinely interesting family trauma that Shang-Chi goes through. But not just that, it has a very dull, boring third act fight scene that nearly put me to sleep. I do have faith that a sequel to this film, which is yet to be announced yet, can be better. There is a lot of potential here, and sequels to MCU introductions are traditionally better than the first movie. For the most part, you guys don't count. I just feel the same emotions towards it that I feel towards Doctor Strange and Black Panther, just another bland origin story for an MCU character. I have worse emotions towards Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I think that film is genuinely very boring and dull. It doesn't make me care at all about Stephen Strange as a character. Sam Raimi tries everything in his power to save this film, but unfortunately, Sam Raimi didn't write the script. He's just the director, but he does direct his ass off, which is much appreciated. It is one of the most visually striking and impressive MCU films to date because they actually hired a guy who knows what he's doing in that department. Part of my issue with the MCU is that they hire pawns as directors who don't really have a creative vision because they're not necessarily allowed to. Kevin Feige at the end of the day calls the shots. It's the story that he wants to tell. A more established director like Edgar Wright, who has made amazing films better than probably any MCU movie, had an actual creative vision, and when it didn't match Kevin Feige's, he left the project. Why did Edgar Wright leave Ant-Man? Because Kevin Feige wanted him to put Falcon in the movie. Yeah, they get these smaller directors who really don't have any power to argue with the larger studio for their creative vision, because if they don't, they're probably just gonna get booted off the project. I am now way less excited for Captain America 4 because they recently announced the director who made the Cloverfield Paradox, the movie that was so bad Paramount said, you know what, just release this on Netflix and don't tell anyone. This just screams another blank director for Kevin Feige to work through. That's why some of my favorite films in the MCU, like the first Iron Man, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Thor Ragnarok, are my favorites because they actually have a vision behind it. It feels like a director's movie. The Guardians movies feel like James Gunn movies. The Thor movies feel like Taika Waititi movies. That first Iron Man movie feels so different from anything in the MCU because it was the first one. They just let Jon Favreau make the movie he wanted to make, and look how that turned out. When the directors aren't allowed to be directors, the visual style and overall filmmaking of these movies feels so dull and boring and lifeless and unfinished at points. I was kinda shocked with what I was seeing in Thor Love and Thunder, especially because I love the visual style of Thor Ragnarok, and Taika Waititi is a great director. And while there are a lot of great shots in this movie, and it does look good at points, for a majority of it, it kinda looks like an ABC sitcom. Not only is Marvel having to pump these out as fast as possible, which is how you get an Iron Man going from this to this, but like I said, with a lot of these directors not being allowed to direct and follow this Marvel formula, leaves these films being very visually not striking. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Doctor Strange, simply seeing a Marvel movie that looked good was very refreshing. Reportedly, Marvel's going after a big name director for Fantastic Four. I think this is good news because when Marvel does get big directors, you get some of their best products. I just hope they allow for the director of the Fantastic Four to direct the Fantastic Four movie. But more important than that, I really just want a good story. Although I did love movies like Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home, I think those movies unfortunately taught the audience the wrong lesson, expecting these movies to be these big event stories where there are a bunch of cameos and references to things we previously know, which is how you get Marvel fans upset that they didn't get to see Ghost Rider and Doctor Strange. Like, who cares? Like, oh, I'm sorry you didn't get to see Tobey Maguire 5 months after you previously saw him in Spider-Man again. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, these are movies and that's not how you should approach movies. This isn't entirely Marvel's fault, and of course this does not speak to everyone by no means, but it seems like a lot of people are just in it for the cameos and not an actual good story. The Illuminati and Doctor Strange, yes, those were cameos and things we previously know, but if we're being real, the Illuminati kind of sucked in that movie, am I right? They didn't really service the plot at all. It was just,
I know what that is!
Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness releasing back to back kind of showed me something in how to and not to do fan service. With Spider-Man No Way Home, a film like that probably shouldn't have worked, but it did. Bringing back literally every main villain from a past Spider-Man movie, including Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, sounds like a recipe for disaster, but they managed to make it work, and it actually was kinda simple. Have them actually service the story. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield don't just show up in the final battle to help out Tom Holland, they help Tom Holland with his pain and grief that he's going through. They acknowledge the past movies that both of those characters were in, and actually give them a character arc and some closure on their issues, more so Andrew Garfield than Tobey Maguire, because I think we all know that Spider-Man 4 is going to be happening anytime soon. There's just too much money there, and it's very possible right now. But also the villains, the Green Goblin is probably one of the best MCU villains. You can honestly argue he's the best. Willem Dafoe's performance and the way he challenges Peter mentally is so well done. Well, yes, it is fan service, it's fan service done well. With Doctor Strange, it's the complete opposite. With that movie, it feels like, look, it's that person, please clap. They're not going to service the story whatsoever. Wanda's just gonna kill them all. And it's not like this does anything to Wanda or Strange. Her killing the Illuminati doesn't influence her actions towards the end of the movie. They're just kind of a roadblock. And something for Marvel to go, please clap, guys, look, you know this character, you like The Office. I'm really scared that Marvel is just going to fall into the pandering nostalgia bait, shoving in a plethora of cameos and characters from other movies just so we go watch the movie and enjoy it. And honestly leaves the Marvel movies feeling more like theme parks than ever before. And what also sucks is that the standalone stories aren't necessarily getting better either. Like I mentioned, I wasn't a fan of Shang-Chi, and this is where we get to Thor Love and Thunder, the latest installment in the MCU, and something I wasn't that big of a fan of. I went to go see this movie with my mom, and she didn't like it either, and that says a lot because this is a Thor movie. She just really likes Thor, I don't know why. Now, I didn't hate Thor Love and Thunder, and it's probably my second favorite of Phase 4, but still, I didn't enjoy it, and that says a lot that it's my second favorite of Phase 4. There's so much fundamentally wrong with this movie. It's so messy, it's all over the place. The humor often undercuts a lot of the emotional stuff that is going on with Jane and Thor and their relationship. This kind of feels like trying to catch thunder in a bottle twice, you like what I did there, but it leaves Thor Love and Thunder feeling more like a parody of a parody. I have no issue with Thor being a goofy character or there being comedy in my superhero movie. It's very welcome and expected in a Marvel movie, but there is a limit with it, and I think Thor Ragnarok did a much better job at balancing the drama and the comedy than this film. It just leaves the tone of this film feeling all over the place and overly corny at points. There's also just a lot of really bad stuff in here as well in terms of the visuals and filmmaking department. I'm not sure if this is a spoiler, but this film sets up for Chris Hemsworth to continue playing this character for a very long time, which, like I previously mentioned, is no issue. This character is a part of me. I love Thor. Chris Hemsworth is kind of reaching the RDJ Hugh Jackman point where he literally is this character. I'm almost positive there's going to be a Thor 5 at this point with the after credit scene, and I'm sure you'll be seeing Thor pop up in future Avengers movies. But God, I just really hope they get this thing under control. This film wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. I want a really good Thor movie. They were getting him right. They were getting him so right, becoming an MCU favorite again. But after watching it, it kind of just feels like a parody of Thor. And it feels like Marvel as a whole was kind of just becoming a parody of itself. I really wanted to walk out of Thor Love and Thunder saying that this could be the start of a really positive direction for the MCU, but it seems like the MCU is more confused on the direction of where they're going than ever. There's so many branching plot points that they're going with multiverse and the Thunderbolt characters, all of which don't really tie into each other very well necessarily. Extremely underwhelming to bad standalone stories, and for a phase that's supposed to introduce a bunch of new characters, I'd say the only one I'm really liking right now is Miss Marvel. That character is someone I can very much so see myself connecting with, but unfortunately it's kind of bogged down by the show being another 6-part Marvel event where everything is overly drawn out, promoting itself as a big 6-hour movie or so, instead of just trying to make a good TV show. Recently an edit of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that hit Disney Plus dropped, which takes the 4+ hour runtime down to a 2.5 hour, essentially making it a movie, and it was much better. Disney should really look at this 6-episode structure and see that it's kinda hurting their projects. I don't think the MCU is doomed or it's even in a terrible spot right now, but it without a doubt is the weakest it has been during its entire run. We have one more movie set for this year, and that is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and I'm gonna be real guys, I don't have a lot of faith in this thing. I think Ryan Coogler is an amazing filmmaker, and he brought some really cool ideas to the table with the first Black Panther, but I already wasn't a fan of that film, and this thing has been through absolute production hell for the most part. The film had to be rewritten after the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman. It's a Black Panther movie without Black Panther, and the film went through production hell and had to be paused multiple times because one of your leads was an anti-vaxxer. It's honestly one of the first Marvel movies I'm looking at, and I'm like, do I want to go see this in the theater, or should I just wait for Disney Plus? I'd say the only things I really have faith in and I'm looking forward to right now would be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and the next trilogy of Spider-Man movies. Now, I'm sure there will be an unsuspected Marvel project that will come along and sweep me off my feet. I am crossing my fingers for Fantastic Four, but at this point, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not going to waste my energy on it. These movies and characters have meant a lot to me, and I mean a lot. I literally grew up with these things, and I'm part of the first generation that can really say that. I remember being in 3rd grade, going to see the Avengers like 5 times in the movie theater. I remember bawling my eyes out when Iron Man died. Bawling my eyes out again when Andrew Garfield came out of that portal. I love Marvel, and I love these movies and characters, but it just hurts when you see a studio who knows how to do it better, making mistakes that they shouldn't make. There's an overwhelming amount of content right now. They need to slow it down with the Disney Plus series, like seriously. They need to get back to making a coherent storyline for all of these characters and stories, and not relying on fan service to sell their movies. Just make a good movie. Not everything needs to be overly connected and tie in with each other, but not everything needs to be so separate and far out either. It just feels messy now. Right before I hit record on this clip I'm recording right now, I can see a little kid wearing a Captain America shirt riding around a scooter in my cul-de-sac. I want him to be able to grow up with a story on Captain America that hits him the same way those first 3 Captain Americas hit me. We don't deserve movies made to sell action figures. We deserve movies that impact us, that have something to say, that influence us to be better people. Superheroes are important. It's not just the hitting and the action and the boom bap bat. I know what that is. It's the man or the woman or the person behind the mask. I know Marvel can do better because they have. They've made some amazing groundbreaking movies. They've changed the landscape of cinema forever. They are the biggest movie franchise in the world and all time. But it's up to them if they want to continue that legacy.
Wonder what you want right now, wonder what you want right now. Used to be body, used to be body,